Have you ever danced so hard that you couldn't stop? Not just from joy or adrenaline or music pulsing through your veins, but something else. Something darker? Imagine your feet move on their own. Your arms flail wildly. Sweat drips from your brow. You try to cry out, but instead you spin faster, faster, until you collapse. And then you get back up and do it again. Sounds impossible, right? Well, it happened. And not just to one person, but to dozens, maybe hundreds. In the sweltering summer of 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, what is now modern-day France, a mysterious outbreak gripped the town. But it wasn't a plague of boils or blood or coughing. No, this was a plague of dance. And people died from it. Yes, you heard that right. People danced themselves to death. Now you might be raising your eyebrow. A dancing plague in the middle of the Renaissance. Is this a joke, some kind of metaphor, a forgotten legend? Let me assure you, the records are real. The accounts come from physicians, priests, and city officials. This actually happened. So grab your drink, turn off the lights, and buckle in, because we're about to dive into one of the strangest, most haunting chapters in human history. Let's begin where it all started, on a quiet morning in July, in the year 1518. It was just another hot summer day in Strasbourg, the kind where the sun hits the cobblestones so hard that the city seems to shimmer. Chickens clucked, merchants shouted over their wares, and the scent of fresh bread mixed with less pleasant smells in the narrow streets. And then she stepped out into the street. A woman. History remembers her only as Frau Trophia. We know little about her. Her first name was never recorded, and there are no portraits. But what she did that morning would burn her name into the annals of the bazaar forever. She began to dance. No music, no celebration, just a rhythmic swaying, a trembling in her arms, a twitch in her legs. At first, neighbors thought she was joking, or maybe touched by the heat. They watched, perhaps even laughed, but then the laughter stopped. Because she didn't stop. Hours passed, she danced through the afternoon, into the evening, and then by torchlight into the night. No rest, no words, just wild, frantic motion. You see, the strange part wasn't just that she was dancing. It was how she danced, out of control, as if some invisible puppet master yanked her strings. Villagers tried to help her. Some offered water, others tried to hold her still. Nothing worked. She danced for days. And here's where things turn even more chilling. After the third day, she wasn't alone. Others began to join her. A man in the market, a teenage girl on her way to mass, a shoemaker who had been watching from his workshop. One by one, they stepped into the street and began to dance. No explanation, no resistance. Something had infected the town. And the dance floor, it was now the cobbled streets of Strasbourg. Now I want you to stop for a moment and imagine this. Close your eyes if you'd like. You're walking down your street, your neighbors are out, and suddenly someone collapses to the ground in a fit of uncontrolled movement. They thrash, twist. Then they stand up and start dancing. Not joyfully, but with desperation, as if their body was betraying them. Would you think they were sick, possessed, or worse, cursed? Because that's what the people of 1518 thought. And this was just the beginning. In the chapters to come, we'll uncover how this bizarre phenomenon spiraled out of control, why authorities thought more dancing would help, and the chilling theories, from divine punishment to hallucinogenic bread, that tried to explain this mystery. But before we go further, tell me this. Have you ever felt something take control of your body, even for a second, something you couldn't explain? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because in the next chapter, things only get weirder. Stay with me. So where were we? Ah yes, Frau Trophia dancing uncontrollably in the streets of Strasbourg, first alone, then joined by others, not out of joy or protest or theater, but out of something that defied logic. Now I want you to imagine this from the townspeople's perspective. You're a baker, a priest, a child selling herbs. You step outside your door and see not one, not five, but dozens of people spinning, stomping, collapsing in the heat, only to rise and do it again. It wasn't just disturbing, it was terrifying. And this wasn't a spontaneous flash mob, this wasn't some ecstatic religious ritual. This was chaos. Within a week, the crowd of dancers had grown. Some say 30 people. Others report up to 100. And these weren't performers, they were victims, exhausted, bleeding from their feet, foaming at the mouth. Yet they kept moving, jerking, twitching, like marionettes trapped in an endless performance. And here's where it takes an even darker turn. They couldn't stop. Literally, they tried, their families tried, but their bodies were possessed by an uncontrollable compulsion to dance, to move, to twist, as if their muscles had minds of their own. And the city, it panicked. The year was 1518. This was a time when science was still wrapped in superstition, when disease was blamed on demons and divine punishment. There were no neurologists, no psychologists, only physicians who bled their patients and clergy who saw sin in every shadow. So what did the town's leaders do? You'd think they'd quarantine the dancers or call for exorcisms, but no. They did something unthinkable. They built a stage. Yes, you heard me. The local magistrates and physicians, believing that the dancers were afflicted by hot blood, a condition thought to be cured by more movement, ordered musicians to play. They cleared out a marketplace, built a platform, and encouraged the afflicted to dance their illness away. Let that sink in. People were collapsing from sheer exhaustion. Some were already dying. And yet, a band of pipers and drummers stood beside them, fueling the frenzy with rhythmic melodies. The streets of Strasbourg became a grotesque theater, a public tragedy mistaken for a festival. And while crowds gathered to watch, more people joined in. Dozens became hundreds. Let me ask you something. What do you think would happen if this occurred today? If one person in your city started dancing non-stop, then 10 more, then 50, would you think it was a trend, a protest, a drug, or would a tiny voice in the back of your mind whisper, something's not right here? Because back then, people believed something had gripped their town, something unnatural. Theories began to spread like wildfire. Was it a curse, a punishment from God, the wrath of a forgotten saint? Some whispered the name of St. Vitus, a Christian martyr believed to curse sinners with uncontrollable movement. His name had long been associated with seizures, tremors, and strange bodily afflictions. Could the town be under his judgment? Priests began to speak of penance, of dark forces, of the devil walking among them. And yet the music played on. Let's pause here. Because this is the moment where the dancing plague stopped being a strange incident and became a catastrophe. Reports say people began to die, not metaphorically, literally. Some from exhaustion, some from heart attacks, some from pure overexertion. Their bodies just gave out. Imagine dancing until your feet bled, your muscles tore, your lungs collapsed, and you still couldn't stop. Strasbourg, once a busy medieval city, now held the air of a nightmare. Mothers danced beside sons. Blacksmiths twitched beside merchants. The line between the living and the dead blurred in the summer heat. So who or what was really behind all this? That's what we'll explore next. Next, we dive deeper into the possible causes, from curses to fungi to psychological hysteria. And I promise you, some of the theories are more shocking than fiction. But before we go on, what do you think caused the dancing plague? Superstition, illness, or something science still can't explain? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your theories. Don't go anywhere. Things are just starting to unravel. The streets of Strasbourg had become an open wound, bleeding, sweating, groaning to the rhythm of madness. And the question on every trembling lip was this: why? Why were people dancing to death? Was it divine punishment, possession, or something more human? In the aftermath, explanations flooded the city as fast as the dancers filled the square. And centuries later, historians and scientists have still not reached a firm conclusion. But let's take a look at the most compelling theories. One by one, you decide what makes sense, or what doesn't. Let's begin with the spiritual theory. Many believed the plague was a curse from St. Vitus, the patron saint of dancers and epileptics. According to medieval tradition, if you angered St. Vitus, by blaspheming, sinning, or neglecting church rituals, he would afflict you with uncontrollable movements. People feared this. They built shrines, They lit candles, they begged for forgiveness. In fact, when the dancing reached its peak, authorities marched the afflicted out of Strasbourg and up into the mountains to a shrine dedicated to St. Vitus. There, they placed the dancers' feet into red shoes. Shoes that had been blessed. Shoes sprinkled with holy water. Some recovered, some didn't. But this theory rests on belief, not evidence, and so the mystery deepened. Then came the medical explanation. Medieval doctors, working without microscopes or modern science, blamed hot blood. They believed excessive heat and bodily humors had to be balanced. Hence, the idea that letting the victims dance it out would cure them. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Others looked back and proposed a more grounded idea: ergot poisoning. Now this one's interesting. Ergot is a toxic mold that grows on damp rye bread. Ingestion of ergot can cause powerful hallucinations, muscle spasms, paranoia, and convulsions. Sound familiar? In fact, ergotism is often cited as a possible cause for outbreaks of madness across Europe. Some even believe it played a role in the Salem witch trials. So, could a batch of contaminated bread have triggered the dancing plague? Maybe, but there's a problem. Ergot poisoning usually causes seizures and paralysis, not dancing. Victims often writhe in pain. They don't choreograph a full-body nightmare routine. Still, it can't be ruled out. And then, there's the psychological explanation. This is where things start to feel very modern. Some researchers argue that the dancing plague was a form of mass psychogenic illness, a collective mental breakdown triggered by extreme stress. Let's not forget the world these people lived in. In 1518, Strasbourg was no paradise. The region was suffering from famine, the harvests had failed, the Rhine River was drying up, plague still lingered in the shadows, life was cruel, harsh, and unpredictable. People were desperate, fearful, spiritually anxious. And when humans are pushed too far, the mind sometimes breaks in strange, collective ways. You might be wondering, can this really happen? Oh yes. There are documented cases throughout history. In 1962, in Tanganyika, now Tanzania, a laughter epidemic spread through a girls' school and lasted months. In 2006, a mysterious illness swept through a school in Portugal. Students collapsed, reporting dizziness and rashes. No physical cause was ever found. The mind is powerful and dangerous. Could the dancers of Strasbourg have been caught in a feedback loop of fear and hysteria? One woman danced, others joined. The crowd panicked, more joined, like a virus not of the body but of the mind. It's possible. But that still doesn't explain the deaths. Because whatever this was, it killed people. And mass hysteria, though real, rarely leads to actual death from movement. So where does that leave us? Saints, mold, madness, none of them fit perfectly. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. Because the human brain hates a void, we crave explanation. But the dancing plague of 1518 remains a puzzle with pieces that don't quite lock. And meanwhile, Strasbourg tried to pretend it never happened. But the story refused to die. Before Strasbourg, before Frau Trophia ever set foot into the sunlit street, there were whispers. Whispers of dancing outbreaks in other corners of Europe. In fact, records show a strange event in Aachen, Germany, in the 1300s, almost 2 centuries before Strasbourg. People danced in churches, in fields, until they collapsed from exhaustion. Another report from the 1400s describes a group of dancers in the Netherlands who moved in what seemed like ecstatic torment, crying out to the heavens. Why don't we talk about those outbreaks? Why were they dismissed as folklore? Maybe because we weren't ready to see the pattern. Strasbourg was simply the largest and most well-documented of a disturbing trend. But the outbreaks faded over time. By the 17th century, the dancing stopped. Almost as mysteriously as it had begun. Was it the rise of science, the decline of superstition, or did whatever dark force had taken hold finally let go? We'll never know for sure. But what we do know is this: Strasbourg was not alone. Something moved across Europe like a shadow, unseen, unheard, but deeply felt. So where does that leave us today? That is where we go next. Long after the last dancer fell, the world moved on. But the memory, it never left. The dancing plague became legend, a tale told in dark corners, a warning etched into the collective unconscious. Artists painted it, writers mentioned it, priests referenced it from pulpits, some called it divine, others called it madness. But behind every myth is truth. Modern science still studies the event. Psychologists, sociologists, historians, each offering a piece of the puzzle. The dancing plague is taught in classrooms, whispered on Reddit threads, dramatized in documentaries. Why? Because it scares us. It forces us to ask, what if I lost control? What if something took over? Not a ghost, not a demon, but my own body, my own mind. That's a fear older than time. And perhaps that's why the story lives on. We think we're safe now, that we understand too much. That reason protects us. But it doesn't. Modern history is littered with outbreaks of strange behavior. In 2001, hundreds of children in Afghanistan reported fainting spells and nausea. No cause was found. In 2012, a school in Sri Lanka saw students collapse during assembly, trembling uncontrollably. No toxin, no disease. And in the age of social media, panic spreads faster than fire. TikTok trends of fainting spells, YouTube challenges that lead to seizures, false medical beliefs that trigger psychosomatic symptoms on a mass scale. Sound familiar? Mass psychogenic illness is alive and well. It's just changed its clothes. But the root cause is the same: fear, uncertainty, stress, a society on the edge of collapse. Just like Strasbourg. So the next time you see a group acting strangely, don't laugh, don't dismiss it. History has shown us, over and over, that the line between reason and madness is thinner than we like to admit. And now it's time. Time to return to where it all began. July 1518. A woman steps into the street, she lifts her arms, her body begins to move. History begins again. Strasbourg never fully recovered. The records were buried, the names forgotten. But if you walk those streets today, you can still feel it. In the silence, in the shadows, the memory of a rhythm that once consumed a city. No monument stands for the victims. No grave marks their resting place. They were ordinary people, caught in something extraordinary. And that is the final horror. Because the dancing plague was not supernatural, not demonic, not divine. It was human. It came from within. And that makes it all the more terrifying. If you made it this far, thank you. You've walked with me through a forgotten nightmare, a story that demands to be remembered. Now I ask you, what do you believe happened in Strasbourg? And more importantly, could it happen again? Let's talk in the comments. And if you want more forgotten horrors, mysteries, and stories the world tried to bury, subscribe and stay curious. Until next time, don't stop dancing. Unless you can't.